Good evening. Tonight we're at Genesis chapter 15, which happens to be one of my favorite parts of the Bible. Now, once I start reading it, you'll think it an odd choice for a favorite Bible passage. But it has to do with Abram's covenant relationship with God. Now, we talked earlier about God's covenant with Noah. Here is God establishing a covenant with Abraham. Now, a covenant that the Bible speaks of was a binding contract, almost like two parties starting up some kind of business relationship. One party agrees to maintain this part of the relationship, and the other party agrees to maintain these things. Well, how does Abram, or any of us for that matter, uphold our part of a covenant relationship with God? Of course, we can trust God to live out and fulfill God's promises, but we all know that we fall short. This passage talks about our relationship with God is upheld by God, and we never have to worry about that going away. Starting in verse 1. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. But Abram said, O Lord God, what wilt thou give me? For I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abram said, Behold, thou hast given me no offspring, and a slave born in my house will be my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, This man shall not be your heir, your own son shall be your heir. And he brought him outside and said, Look toward heaven and number the stars, if you are able to number them. Then he said to him, So shall your descendants be. And he believed the Lord, and he reckoned it to him as righteousness. And he said to him, I am the Lord, who brought you from Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. But he, Abram, said, O Lord God, how am I to know that I shall possess it? And God said to him, Bring me a heifer 3 years old, a she-goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. I just want to pause here because this sounds very odd unless you understand that this is the beginning of a rite, R-I-T-E, a ceremony to establish a legal contract in the ancient Near East. Anyone who wanted to form some kind of business partnership would go through this ceremony to declare their bond with the other, to uphold their part of the bargain. And so when Abram asked God how he could ever know that God would uphold his promise, God says basically, okay, let's form a contract. And he brought him all these, cut them in two, and laid each half over against the other, but he did not cut the birds in two. And when birds of prey came down upon the carcasses, Abram drove them away. As the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram, and lo, a dread and great darkness fell upon him. Then the Lord said to Abram, Know of a surety that your descendants will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be slaves there, and they will be oppressed for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation in which they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. As for yourself, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age. And they shall not come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. When the sun had gone down and it was dark, behold, a smoking firepot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces. So the ceremony to establish a contract was the sacrifice of these animals, and they would be put on kind of opposite sides of a path or a trench. And then each party would walk between the animals to kind of sign the contract, saying that they would keep their part of the bargain. But on this occasion, Abram was put into a deep sleep. He couldn't move. The only thing that passes between the animals is a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch. Now, this should remind you of what happened to Moses and the Hebrew people when God was leading them in the wilderness. He used a pillar of smoke by day and a pillar of fire by night. And so this smoking fire pot and this flaming torch represents the presence of God walking through the animals to seal the contract, to seal the deal. But Abram was kind of paralyzed. He was put into this deep sleep. It was almost like the word there is hard to translate. It would be like somebody being tasered. They're alert, but they are not able to move. So Abram can't walk through the animals. The only one who walks through these animals to establish the contract is God. What God is saying here is you'll know that this covenant relationship between the two of us will be upheld because I will uphold my part of the relationship and I will carry your part as well. So many times we think being in a relationship with God means being perfect. And if we're not perfect, we're out of the relationship with God. And that's simply not true. God is concerned with us. God created us. God calls us his own. And in any relationship with God, God upholds his part of the covenant and ours as well. Hope you have a good evening.